Okay, I'm going to invite Susanna up now to come and do our reading. If you've got a Bible, why don't you open your Bibles now to 1 Timothy, and Susanna will do the reading. Why don't we stand together for the reading, shall we?
It's 1 Timothy 6, verses 6 to 10. Godliness with contentment is great pain, for we brought nothing into the world and we can take nothing out of it. But if we have food and clothing, we will be content with that. Those who want to get rich fall into temptation and a trap, and into many foolish and harmful desires that plunge people into ruin and destruction. For the love of money is the root of all kinds of evil. Some people, eager for money, have wandered from the faith and pierced themselves with many griefs.
Why don't you take your seats, everyone?
Fantastic. Well, I hope you're all well this morning. Are we well this morning? Good, good. I just got back from a little week away last night, and I prepped this before I went, so hopefully I can remember my line of thought before I left. I'm sure I will, don't worry. We are going to start a little bit differently, though, this morning, and that means I'm going to need some help. Are you up for helping me? Are you up for a bit of interaction? Okay, here's what we're going to do. I'm going to give you a short story, and you're going to guess my theme, okay? So if you were in the pre-service prayer, this is not your chance to cheat, okay? Because I've already told you, all right? So pre-service prayer people, you can just kind of sit on your responses for now. By the way, the prize is we have a lovely crunchy bar here going to the winner. So you also will need to like crunchy if you want to benefit from that. And Caroline will have the rest of them when she sits down there to play during response. Okay, here we go. So there was a fisherman and there was a businessman. You ready? A businessman was vacationing in a small coastal village in Mexico when he came across a fisherman relaxing in a hammock after a short morning of fishing. Curious, the businessman asked him, "Why aren't you out fishing for longer?" The fisherman replied, "Well, I've caught enough to feed my family today. But if you stayed out for longer, then you could catch more fish. You could sell them, you could buy a bigger boat, you could even hire a crew, you could open a processing plant, you could eventually move to the city, you could run a corporation, and you could become a millionaire." The fisherman paused for a moment. "And then what?" "Well, then you could retire early and you could move to a small village. You could sleep late. You could fish a little. You could play with your kids. You could take siestas. You could relax in the evenings with your wife." The fisherman smiled and said, "Isn't that what I'm already doing?" What is the theme of today? Oh my gosh. Who said that first? You've got to be honest now. I think I heard Zara. There you go, Zara. Who else do you think it was, Zara? We've got a few to go around. There's a couple over there. Sorry, Caroline, they're all going. Who else said it quickly? Steve, you didn't open your mouth. You just want a chocolate. Okay, well, you got one anyway. Contentment is what we're looking at today. What is contentment? Well, let me help you. The dictionary definition says this. It's a state of happiness or satisfaction. It's an emotion, yes. You might feel content after a big dinner. You might feel content after a long walk or completing a hard but satisfying task. But the Bible is really clear that contentment actually is more than just a feeling or an emotion based on circumstances. It's more of a state of being. It's what enables the Apostle Paul in another letter to say this in Philippians 4. He said, "I have learned to be content whatever the circumstances. I know what it is to be in need, and I know what it is to have plenty. I have learned the secret of being content in any and every situation, whether I'm well fed or whether I'm hungry, whether living in plenty or whether living in want." I wonder, can we say too with Paul that we have learned to be content whatever the circumstances of our lives? It's interesting to me that he describes finding contentment in any situation akin to learning a secret. Did you notice that? And I don't think it's because he's trying to keep contentment a secret, keep it on the down low. But rather, I think it's a secret because so many people seem to live without it. So many people live without it. It's as if it might as well be a secret that few people live in the good of. And I think if that was true when Paul was writing this letter to Timothy in the first century, how much more true do we think it is today, particularly in the West? And I actually have a little bit of sympathy for us. I think it's pretty hard to be satisfied with what you have when you're constantly told that there is something newer and something better that is just about to arrive. We live in a culture with an insatiable appetite for more, don't we? Where we often judge the value of what we have by comparing it to what somebody else has. So I think this is valuable, and I'm happy with it, but I'm going to compare it to what I see other people have before I really assess how happy I am. How many times have you been in a restaurant and you've looked at the menu and you've ordered your food and it's come and you've been happy? Only for your happiness, only for your contentment to be robbed by food envy when your friend's meal arrives. It's true in small, silly, everyday situations, and it's true in really big ways too. Comparison kills contentment. We're going to come to see in our text today that this is never more true in the area of money and the desire for more of it. In the area of money and the desire for more of it. The backdrop to this short letter from Paul to Timothy is Paul's constant warnings about the false teachers and how they were trying to derail the church. We don't have time to get into all of the detail, but basically in verses 3 to 6, we're told of two dangers Timothy needed to be aware of. The first one is that these false teachers of their day had started to depart from the teachings of Jesus. They had this unhealthy interest in what he calls controversies or quarrels and malicious talk. And we don't have any of the details as to exactly what they were, but what we do know is it wasn't leading to health in the church. That's the important bit. And the second thing, which we are going to spend more time on today, is that they started to use godliness as a means to financial gain. Godliness as a means to financial gain. Paul's instruction to Timothy is, don't be like them at all costs. They're aiming at completely the wrong thing. And not just is it immoral, but it's also a twisted view of godliness. They will never be satisfied. They will never be satisfied. He then uses a clever bit of wordplay to drive home the point. This is what he says. He says, they think godliness is a means to financial gain. Okay, gain. You want to know what is really of great gain in this life? Verse 6, godliness with contentment is great gain. They're all about the gain, but they're trying to gain in the wrong area. It's never going to satisfy. He says, you want to know what is really of great gain? Godliness mixed with contentment. I love how Jeremiah Burroughs, I think he was around in the kind of 1500s. This is how he describes contentment in the rare jewel of Christian contentment. He says this, Christian contentment is that sweet, inward, quiet, gracious frame of spirit which freely submits to and delights in God's wise and fatherly disposal in every condition. Do you have it? Do you have it this morning? Are you living in the good of it? Don't you long to know more of it? More of that sweet, quiet, gracious frame of spirit? Imagine for a second with me. You might want to close your eyes for this moment. Imagine going about your days with an inner peace with what God's already given you, free from comparison, free from envy, with a heart that's guarded from the tentacles of materialism. I know I need more of it. Let me pray for us. Lord, I pray this morning that you would graciously expose the places of discontent in our hearts. I pray this morning that you would lead us gently into a deeper place of contentment in you. Lord, where we're chasing after the wrong things, Lord, redirect our affections. Redirect our affections this morning, I pray. In your name. Amen. Okay, the first thing that Paul uses in the text to, I guess, undermine the false teachers and to bolster his claim that contentment in God, not wealth, is the real goal of our lives, is a rationale for contentment. Verse 7, for we brought nothing into the world, and we can take nothing out of it. In birth and in death, we are all the same. That's what he's saying. We came into this world with nothing, and you leave this world with nothing. It doesn't matter how rich you are, how rich you manage to get in this life, all of our bank balances effectively, after our last heartbeats, are the same. Zero. They flatline just like your heartbeat does. So why spend all your life's energy, headspace, and precious time chasing what's temporary? Imagine for a moment, just go along with me. Imagine you go on a holiday with a friend, and you get a little Airbnb by the sea for a week, something like that. And you arrive, and you think, right, going to start enjoying this holiday. But your friend suddenly goes in, and the furniture seems to be in the wrong place, starts obsessing over the furniture. It's like, listen, I know you want to go to the beach, but let's just spend some time moving the sofas around. Can we do that? Is that all right? By the way, this is no reflection on the holiday we have just had down in Norfolk. The furniture was in completely the right place. Anyway, so you spend all this time moving the furniture around with them, and you think, right, finally, day 2's coming. Now we're going to get to relax. And you're just about to go out the door, and they're like, no, the walls. Look at the walls. The walls are just the wrong color. The walls are the wrong color. We're going to need to look. So they go on the phone, DIY store, let's go and get some paint. You spend the second day of your holiday repainting the lounge, okay? And by this point, you're getting pretty cross. And then you think, okay, day 3, you're there. You got your bucket, your spades, you got all your armbands. You're ready to rock. You're ready to go down to the beach. Yeah, wow. You're ready to go down to the beach. And what happens? They go, no, the kitchen needs remodeling. It's not up to scratch. So they start getting on the phone to the builders. And at this point, you've had it. You were so cross. And you just shout at the top of your voice. You're like, we are here for a week. None of this really matters. All of this is temporary to us. It's not even ours. It's not even our home. We are here to enjoy ourselves for a week, and then we'll be gone. How ridiculous it would be, right? And yet, how many people live our lives like this? How many people invest everything to accumulate what we can't take with them? How many people put all their focus on what is temporary? Let's look back into our text. Verse 8. But if we have food and clothing, we will be content with that, Paul says. Next, he gives us a baseline for contentment. I think Paul's actually being really realistic here. There's a baseline for living a contented life. There's almost a lower limit. It's very hard to live a contented life without your very basic needs met. Everyone needs food and clothing. And not just clothing, but if you actually look at the word clothing in the text, it also comes from kind of this root word, which you can also get from it, shelter. So he's talking about a roof over your head, not sleeping in the rain. I'm talking very basic needs met. And when I say food and clothing, I don't mean the best restaurants. We're talking daily bread here. That's what he's alluding to. And I see this as an indirect call from Paul to alleviate poverty wherever we come across it. For the church to be on the front edge of alleviating poverty whenever we come across people who are in need with those basic needs that aren't met. In a world blessed with such rich resources, how can it be that so many people don't have those basic needs? What would it look like for God's people to be so content in him that they give themselves to making sure that nobody else lives under that baseline that he is describing? We have a rich history of this as a church. Church throughout history has always been on the leading edge of alleviating poverty wherever they find it. In the first century in Rome, it was common for unwanted babies, especially girls, and disabled infants to be left to die in the streets and in public places. Early Christians would secretly bring them into their homes to raise them in their communities. During the Industrial Revolution, skip on a little bit later, it caused massive urban poverty, especially in cities like Manchester, in London. In a time where only the richest of kids would get educated, there was this guy called Lord Shaftesbury. a devout Anglican, and he set up these ragged schools for all children now to get an education, even if they're from the most poor families. During the very same time, it was also common for children as young as 4 years old from desperately poor families to be used as chimney sweeps because of their size. Got a picture here. It was common for them to suffer breathing issues. Many of them would get stuck and would die in these chimneys. This was considered par for the course. This was considered collateral damage in a job that just needed to be done. Lord Shaftesbury, again, motivated by the dignity of every human life made in the image of God, he campaigned tirelessly for change. And this is what he said: what is morally wrong can never be politically right. These things only happen when believers live in the good of a greater contentment in God. When we live for a heavenly prize, not earthly comforts, you can focus on things like this, giving yourself tirelessly to things like this. And I think the question for us, as I read and reflect and think about the examples before us, is where are we joining the fight in our everyday lives? What's our battle? What's in front of us, big or small? What's the injustice that's right in front of you? And what are we doing to bring about change? Verse 9. Those who want to get rich fall into temptation and a trap, and into many foolish and harmful desires that plunge people into ruin and destruction. For the love of money is a root of all kinds of evil. Some people, eager for money, have wandered from the faith and pierced themselves with many griefs. Paul moves on now to give us a stark warning against discontentment, or to the discontent. And there are 3 strands to it that I just want to pick out. The first is this: it's of temptation and traps, really of believing that you always need more. That's the trap. It's a trap because once you believe the lie that the more you have, the happier you'll be, the further away contentment becomes. There was once a party on Shelter Island in New York, hosted by a billionaire hedge fund manager. You may have heard the story. There was an author, 2 authors actually. The first is Kurt Vonnegut, turned to his friend Joseph Heller. Joseph Heller was the writer of Catch-22, famous book, sold loads of copies. And he said this, he says, "Joe, our host made more money yesterday than you've earned from your famous book over its entire history." Heller simply replied with this piercing line, "Yes, but I have something he will never have, enough. I have something he will never have, enough." That one line from this famous tale pierces through the fog of comparison, greed, envy, and material ambition. And I want to ask you this morning, have you defined in your life enough? If you don't define what enough is, we'll live at the mercy of those who always tell us we always need more. If we don't define what enough is, we'll never be truly free to be generous and experience the joy of meeting the needs of others. The second strand to the warning is one of the most, famous quoted and sometimes often misquoted verses in the Bible. A root of evil. For money is the root of all kinds of evil. Money is the root of all kinds of evil. Is that right? That's wrong. Well done. For the love of money is the root of all kinds of evil. What's it actually saying? Well, it's saying much of the evil that you see in the world around you, over history and today, has its root, has its origin, if you like, in people's love and desire for money and for riches. Just think of some of the greatest atrocities that you see around you through history. War, accumulation of land and resources. Slavery, taking another person as your own possession. Human trafficking, using another person as a commodity. Abortion, the killing of the vulnerable and the voiceless unborn. Last year in the UK, there were just over 300,000 in the UK alone. If you look at some of the most commonly cited reasons, you'll find feeling not financially prepared is one of the top reasons given, and in the top 5, you've got, I don't want it to interfere with my future plans or my lifestyle. The subtext being, what if this baby will cost me? What will it cost me in the future? And if I deem that cost too much, well, somehow extinguishing it, killing it, feels like an okay option. The love of money is the root of all kinds of evil. The obvious, the loud, and the quiet, the subtle, the stuff our society just nods along to. Not only that, but we're told it will also cause some people to wander away from their faith. A road to leaving the faith, verse 10. Some people eager for money have wandered from the faith, and have also pierced themselves with many griefs. How does this wandering happen, do you think? Well, I imagine it is a slow, steady departure that comes from trying to live with 2 opposing goals. A slow, steady departure, I don't imagine it happens overnight, by trying to live with 2 opposing goals in your life. Living with conflicting priorities is actually really hard and tiring, and it only lasts so long before one is sacrificed to the other. Jesus says in Matthew 26:24, no one can serve 2 masters. Either you'll hate one, you'll love the other, or you'll be devoted to the one and you'll despise the other. You cannot serve both God and money. I think it would be really easy for us to read that, to hear that read, and think, I know the type of people who would be vulnerable to that. Yeah, I know the type of people who would be vulnerable to that. Not us, but I know the type of person who would be. But I think a more nuanced question, a more maybe honest question to ask ourselves this morning and to reflect on would be, are we making decisions in our lives that are led more by maybe financial security than following Jesus wholeheartedly? Have we committed to some things in our lives out of a desire for more, or maybe just to try and live in line with how everybody else around us is living, with material expectations maybe, which just means there's not much room in our lives for other things. There's not much room in our lives for what God has got for us. 3 strands to the warning. Beware of temptations and traps, and beware of the love of money, what it will lead to, and especially away from the faith. But the last thing I want to close with is this. What can we actually do to rid ourselves of this discontentment? Not just heed the warning, that's important, but what can we proactively do to rid ourselves of discontent in our heart and to fuel contentment in God? Where can we be proactive? To find the answer, we need to jump down to verse 18 for a moment. And what we see is this, an antidote to discontentment. Verse 18, commands them to do good, to be rich in good deeds, and to be generous and willing to share. Feels quite obvious, quite basic stuff, but apparently it will change your life. First aspect to this is practice generosity towards others. Generosity, step by step, gift by gift, act by act, will stifle the oxygen of greed that discontentment feeds on. It will stifle the oxygen, it will suffocate it. There's a joy and there's a delight that accompanies generosity, which just is bigger and it is more powerful than greed. Have you ever thought about why generosity is not just good in theory, but why it actually feels good when you put it into practice? Why it's actually a feeling as well? I think we could say, it's because you see a need met and that feels good, but I think it's more than that. When we practice generosity, what we're actually doing is we're aligning ourselves with who we were made, created to be, I believe. Because we're made in the image of God to reflect him to the world. That's how you were made. Genesis 1:27 says this, so God created mankind in his own image. In the image of God, he created them. And the God whose image we are created in is what? Generous? Yeah, generous. He's not greedy, he's not stingy, he's actually abundantly generous. So although the result of sin in the world caused a departure and a distortion of that image in us, every time you step into generosity, what you're doing is realigning yourself more closely with who you've been made to be. And if you realign yourself more closely with who you've been made to be, you've got to bet that that's going to have an impact in how you feel. It's how you've been wired to be. And this isn't just something that we wait to do. You don't wait to feel like it. I don't know if you were here a few weeks ago, Matt preached on forgiveness. And when he's speaking about forgiveness, even though it is good for us, if we just waited until we felt like forgiving somebody who had harmed us, then actually we'd be waiting a really, really long time. It's similar in that way with generosity. It's a command, it's not a suggestion. It's a command that if we are obedient to, then we get to live in the good of it. And if we're not obedient to it, well, you just don't get to live in the good of it. But secondly, and I'd probably argue even more importantly, the second aspect to this antidote is actually we've got to get our heads around and we've got to receive something from God. Receive his generosity towards us. We need to take God not just at his word, that's important, but also at his actions by remembering and receiving his generosity towards you. You know, I went to Romania. I've been to Romania probably 8 times in my life, and the first time I went, I was 13 years old. My dad helped start a charity out there which works with street children. And you might remember back to when you were at school, you have to do something called work experience. So a lot of my friends would go to like the post office with their parents or to the office. And I said, Dad, I know that sometimes you're in the office, but I also know that you go to other countries sometimes. So let's line up the work experience with some more exciting work. And he was like, okay, we'll do that. So I got to go to Romania at 13 years old. And one of the partners, which they had partnered with, a guy called David, became a close friend of the family. He fostered many, many street children out there. Many children who had been left just on the streets, had no place of refuge or safety. And while I was there for a while, I was kind of knocking about with some of these kids, some of them of a similar age. I began to witness something. I began to witness that they would take things from him behind his back, that they would steal from him. And I just remember feeling this kind of sense of righteous indignation almost. Just as I was looking, I was like, what are you doing? Like, this guy's like giving up his home for you, his time for you, and you're waiting for his back to be turned, and you're taking from him. Like, what are you doing? And I saw this, and I didn't say anything at first, day 1, day 2, day 3. By like day 5, so much had built up in me that I can't take this any longer. And I stormed up to David, and I was like, David, I've got to tell you something, man. These guys, they're taking advantage of your kindness. They're taking from you. Don't you know what they're doing? And I'll always remember what he said to me. In a quiet and understanding tone, he responded with these words. He said, everything in their life before now has been unstable or been snatched away. He said, it'll take a while, but soon they'll know that I'm not going anywhere. And he said, when they realize I'm not going anywhere, the stealing will stop. Because he'd seen it time and time and time and time again. These poor kids stole because they thought their resources were scarce still. They were full of discontent and fear because they thought it would disappear as quickly as it had arrived. Over time, though, trust and contentment grew. I guess I want to finish by asking you the question, do you know the Father who clothes the lilies of the field, who promises to be your greatest provider? Do you know the Father who will never walk out on you? Do you know the generosity of that Father who sent his Son to die in your place on a rugged Roman cross so that if you would just put your trust in him and allow him to take your sin and shame from you, that you would get to live in the freedom of that? Free to love him in return and free to love and be generous to others. So content in his love, a contentment that will fuel a life of grace and a life of generosity. You know, contentment flows most freely from a place of peace, knowing that all our greatest needs have already been met. Do you have that peace? Do you want to know more of that peace? Do you know that freedom? It's available for all of us today. You want to stand with me? I'm going to pray. I'll invite the bands back up. Just encourage you just to take a moment in the quiet. You may want to close your eyes just to help you focus. Lord, I want to thank you this morning that You see our greatest needs, Lord, and you want to impress on our hearts this morning that you're quick to meet them, that we live in a world full of such generous resources, such rich resources. I just believe God wants to settle our hearts this morning, wants to remind you, wants to fuel thankfulness in your hearts of all the things that you already have in him, the gifts, the good things that we get to enjoy. He wants to cast your eyes afresh on Jesus. Cast your eyes afresh on what he's done for you, on the greatest gift ever given, life. Life in his name that cost him so much so that we can stand here today free, so we can stand here today at peace, so we can stand here today not with our eyes on other things, but with our eyes fixed firmly on him, the author and perfecter of our faith. Thank you, Jesus. We worship you.